Well, I want to welcome you to our program today. Our special guest today is Bea Ingersoll, and Bea comes to us from Albany, Illinois. And so, Bea, thank you so much for coming on the program today. Bea is a Stonecroft speaker, and she's, has got quite a life story to tell. And that Bea and her husband Bill have two wonderful children, two sons, but unfortunately they came down with muscular dystrophy at young ages, and so that meant that their life was, well, in my definition, cut short. But nevertheless, as I learned more about her two sons, it's amazing what they were able to accomplish in their 21 and 22 years of life. And so, Bea, well, first of all, I just want to share my sympathies. I know that this goes back, about 20 years ago since your children passed away, but nevertheless, that's got to be awfully tough. And so I just think of the joy of having children being brought into this life and into this world and being their parents. But yet parenting certainly has its challenges for everybody. Yeah. But unfortunately for you, it was one of those challenges that parents would never want to face. And so why don't you just share a little bit about your two sons as far as when they were born and the joy of their birth and coming into your lives.
Okay. Well, we had two sons, and Gary was born in 1971, and then David was born in 1975. And my husband and I, we were just thrilled that we wanted to have children, and we enjoy them. And in my talk for Stonecroft, I share some of the cute things they did when they were kids, and like David took the vacuum cleaner in the bathroom and filled it with water and said he was a fireman, and how they sold lemonade together, and then they'd get fighting because one of them would drink all the lemonade and they wouldn't make any money. So cute things like that. And we thought, we had normal children, and when Gary was 6, we knew that he couldn't run very much, or he couldn't go up the stairs very easily. But he was in kindergarten, and the teacher wanted to have that we should take him to a doctor because she thought that he should be checked. The physical therapist was going to help him get his legs stronger. So we took him to our pediatrician, and then she sent us to Iowa City. She thought he had something, but she didn't think it was too serious. And then they did a muscle enzyme blood test. And then we had to wait 6 weeks, and then when that came back, we found out that he had Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And the doctors told us that by the time he was 10, he'd be in a wheelchair, and he would die by the time he was 20. So, that was just a terrible blow to us. And then we took and then David was 3, and we took him, and just with a blood test, they confirmed that he had the disease too. So it was a blow, and I went through like a depression and thought, how can this happen? And they're going to die, and there's not a thing I can do about it. And that was when the Bible kind of became alive to me, and I just started reading it. And then God sent us people to love, and it took a while. But then a therapist told us once we accept the fact that they were going to be in wheelchairs, that we'd be able to live with it. And I just said, no, we would never be able to live with it. We would never be happy again. But the Lord has other plans. And so after, I don't know, it took us maybe a year, to really kind of get into this and get them to doctors. And we doctor down in Moline, Illinois. And, we'd take them to doctors, and then slowly they went into braces, and then after the braces, and they got so they couldn't, then they had wheelchairs, but they got so they couldn't move at all. Then they went into electric wheelchairs, and they really liked them because they could, in school, they could get all around, and they could run their own lives. And so, they accepted it pretty good, I don't know. I just think the Lord was using them, that, they were never acted like they were afraid, but they did have trouble sometimes, with their friends, and just knowing that they were different, knowing that they couldn't run, and they couldn't go out for football, and they couldn't do so many things. So, you know, they found other things to do, so they developed their minds. They were very bright. And, you know, one was a valedictorian, and they were honor students. And, oh, well, they worked on the school anniversary. And they sang in our school, the church choir, and David played the clarinet. So they did mostly all the things that normal kids could do, but they couldn't do sports, you know, but they liked to go and watch the football games, so we'd take them and their feet would be frozen, and so whatever they were interested in, and we took them to galleries and museums and football games, and whatever they wanted, we tried to give them as normal a life as possible. So
It sounds like both of your children, and Gary and David, right? Mm-hmm. They both were just very special kids. It just sounded like they had quite the personalities, very intelligent, doing a lot of things, just had a real zest for life. But when Gary, he was your first one, when he was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, then they thought they would do a test for David.
yeah,
You know, I guess is it common to, is this kind of a genetic thing, or
yeah,
I mean, this is kind of
I should have
odd
said that. Yeah.
that one, you know, so that's what I'm wondering about is, because I've known families where somebody's got muscular dystrophy and, you know, a child, and but you know the other kids are healthy, but what are the odds that both, you know, that one would get this, but that the other one would get this too? I mean, are there some forms of muscular dystrophy that just simply are genetic, or what?
Yeah,
What would
should have
you
said that? Yeah.
Well, how would you explain this?
Yeah, it is an inherited disease, and the mother is the carrier. And so if I'd had girls, they'd have been a carrier. So for the male child, genetically, then you give them the disease. So I was a carrier. We don't know where it comes from. It comes from the mother's lines, but we didn't know, you know, anywhere. It could have been several generations back, and back then they didn't even know what happened. You know, they usually died by the time they were 10 back then, because they didn't have antibiotics or anything if they got sick, you know.
So you just don't know of anybody in your family
we
in
didn't
the
know.
recent generations
We
that
just
had
figured it
anything
was
like
back
this?
a couple of generations that
but
even
it's
my mother didn't know about it, you know.
Something that gets passed down from, you know, maybe somewhere down the line.
Yeah, and then the blood test, see, they did like a muscle I don't even know if they do this anymore, a muscle enzyme where on Gary, where they cut a little out of his leg and then run it, and then they found out, you know, that he had that disease. And then so they said with a brother, then they could just do a blood test to see if he had the high muscle enzyme, and he didn't have to have the biopsy. And he didn't show any signs of it yet. He was 3, and so then they took the blood test and said your other son has it too. So
Yeah, so Gary kind of showed signs like around preschool, kindergarten age.
weakness, like in the legs.
I kind of noticed something. Yeah. Now, as far as your children go, like you said, that they could tell that that there was something abnormal about this. You know, that, well, I want to go out and play with my friends and play kickball or climb trees or whatever it was, but now they noticed that they had some limitations. I mean, but you said that they accepted it. I would think that would be awfully hard for some young boys to be able to deal with it, saying, Mom, you know, all my friends in the neighborhood are going to climb trees or build forts or play kickball. Well, why can't I? I mean, that had to be hard for them and heartbreaking for you and Bill.
Yeah. Well, the youngest one had more anger, I think. He was really active. Where the oldest one, Gary, he was never really that active anyway. He was just kind of quiet. But yeah, they had some anger. You know, I mean, why am I like this? And why can't I get out and play? And, you know, why don't I have more friends, you know, normal friends? But as you know, after a year or so, then they accepted it, and it's very slow. It's slow. You just slowly get a little bit weaker and weaker, and then like Gary got so that I didn't know it at school that he couldn't hold his head up. His head would, so then they had to make a thing for his wheelchair so he could lean back, which I didn't know. But I think it was hard on him, but I think after a while they knew there was nothing that they could do about it, and they just excelled in other areas, you know. But
Yeah, it just sounds like
They
it
loved
wasn't.
football.
It wasn't like they would have loved to have played football, and obviously they couldn't. But it just sounds like they were the type of boys to say, well, but I'm not going to just stop living. But then that's where they just developed or excelled in other areas.
Yeah. Well,
Like academics.
Yeah, we wouldn't let them, we wouldn't let them feel sorry for themselves. We'd hear them moan, we say, there's not anything you can do anything you want to do. You want to do it bad enough. There's other things you can do, So we just encouraged them to, like they got on the school, worked on the yearbook, so they would do that. And then one of them, played music. And so they did mostly normal what they could, but physically they couldn't handle.
Yeah.
They couldn't run, they couldn't.
But they'd like to go and support the team and have that sense of being part of it then.
Yeah. They'd be, one of them was like Gary, he was in a play where they sang, and he just had his manual wheelchair then, and so they were dancing with him, they were getting his wheelchair and they'd dance and go across the stage and they'd turn him around, and they really made amends for him. And the school, put in ramps or whatever they needed, but I kind of became a mother that was going to fight for her kids, and so I went in to, fight for their physical therapy, that the school would give them physical therapy, and then I wrote letters to congressmen to make buildings accessible, and so, and I don't know, in the winter then, it was scary when they'd get sick because they could get a cold or pneumonia and die, and that's how the oldest one, he got that going to college. But, we just said, what kind of a life is it to keep them home and protect them and not get out in the public? And then...
Well, you were an advocate, a voice for your children, but really when you think about it, for hundreds, if not thousands of children, because as a result of your efforts, look at what has happened, is that life has become easier, not just only for children and people who are suffering from muscular dystrophy, but from so many debilitating things. That now life has become more manageable, and where you can actually be going about accessible. That I notice now where as I go into a community that that most buildings and places have become much more handicap friendly. Let's say.
Than what it was.
Yeah.
Well, see, 1975 they passed the Disability Awareness Act, so I knew exactly what the law, what they could get, and they, then that's when they opened up elevators and opened up buildings, and so the places that we traveled, we had a van and a lift in it, and so it had to be accessible. So we took them Florida, Disney World and Football Hall of Fame, and places that they could get into.
Do as much as you could with the time that you had. It just seems like that was their attitude, that was your attitude, or I guess that was your attitude that rubbed off on them.
And we like to travel with them and go, but boy, it was a lot of work. I don't know if people realize how much work. It was a lot of work when you traveled, because you had to take they had a commode, you had to take that with you, and a lift. After they got so big, we had a lift for them. We couldn't lift them anymore. And so whenever you traveled, you had to take all this stuff with you. Where our home was all set up for it, so. But.
Yeah. Well, it just sounds like you really looked on the bright side or the positive side, but your faith. And that's one of the things, just, like you said, well, I did as much as I could for them. The one thing I couldn't do was take away their disease. I mean, that feeling of powerlessness. And I would think that for you and Bill, that this is where, well, we are your parents, we are your providers, we're your protectors, we're the ones that can make the owies or bandage up the owies and make them go away, so to speak. But this is a lot bigger than what we can handle. And so a lot of this, like you say, to begin with, you were suffering with, which is normal.
Yeah.
I mean, that any of us, depression and anger and things like that.
Why did this happen?
And so where are you, God, in all of this? And but yet it sounds like your faith really was so important to you, and how God was working with you in that time, but continues to do so, to say that we are not going to forget Gary and David, and that their lives will continue to be a blessing to so many people as they were living, but now in their memory, that we will not let their memory fade, but that even today you go out and you're speaking, and to say that, no, their lives are still impacting the world. I mean, I always think if they would have lived, because, well, one of them was valedictorian, and the other one had honors,
Yeah.
and I just think bright young boys, and I just, just think what they could be doing today if
Yeah.
they were still living, but yet
We think of that
but
too.
yet their memory and in the legacy and in all of what you are remembering and what you're doing in their memory, that are still impacting, because there's so many people out there who are struggling, with things that they feel so powerless over. Whether it's their children who are struggling physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, or whether they're dealing with things individually, or a spouse that's got, dementia issues, or whatever it may be. That you have got quite a ministry, because it's like you've walked down into this valley. You know the pain, but you know that God is also there in that valley, where sometimes I think it's easy for people just to say, well, God, you should have dealt us a bad hand. This isn't fair.
Yeah.
And if anything, they just develop this anger toward God and this terrible bitterness for life. I've known a lot of people where that's where they've taken their pain, and they've just developed, just kind of this pattern of bitterness to go through the rest of their lives with. And I just think, well, that's not really the way to go through your life, really. But it's got to take an awful lot to overcome that.
Yeah, I think, well, actually that's, when I really became close to God, when we joined the church, but this is actually when I received Him into my heart, and I got down on my knees and said, Lord, I can't do this. I can't do this by myself. I can't live and watch this happen to my kids. And, I just opened myself up to God, and I just said, I can't do this. Will you help me? That was the words, I guess. I said, will you help me? And then, I just let it all out, and then it was amazing. It was just that I felt that peace, and calm, and the Lord was with me. He was looking over my shoulder, and like He said, I will give you the strength, look at me and I'll give you the strength. So that was when I decided, we weren't going to feel sorry for ourselves. We were going to make a life for the boys, that they could live and have joy and be happy. And, how many people know when their death is going to come? And, then we meet parents that said, oh, we spent so much time, with them because we knew maybe that we wouldn't have them. And then I've met so many parents that have lost a child in an accident or something like that, and said, I never spent enough time with my kid, So we never had any regrets, but it was just the Lord, and then, the Lord was in their hearts too. It was just, they were happy, and, and then actually, I guess I didn't put in there when they went to college, then they talked me into going to college. When I drove them to college, Gary said, we want you to go to college. And I said, well, I'm too old. Why would I want to go? So, well, all taking them to college, and I started taking courses to become an elementary education teacher. And it was hard, but we coordinated colleges, and they only went a couple years before they passed away. But then I went ahead and graduated and became a substitute, I guess, more a substitute teacher and children's librarian, because they told me that they wanted me to go on. They wanted me to go on to school. They wanted me to take classes. It was like saying, we may not be here someday, so you need something to do. I really believe that, So, and then another interesting thing is that Gary he was older, he was 22, and he took out a life insurance policy, and he made his parents the beneficiary. So that policy came in the mail the day he passed away. And so we used that to finish so that I could go on to college. Otherwise, I probably would have never been able to afford it. So it's just things like that. But and it just the Lord was just totally evident in our lives, and
Yeah.
they were in their hearts, and so many people, told me after they passed away how they touched their lives, which we had no idea, we had no idea. So then I came to the conclusion that, God was using them to spread his love. I just really believed that. But maybe I didn't like it, but, but
Right. No, none of this is.
But it's,
yeah.
I think, what is
right.
it? What's lemon? You make lemonade, or whatever.
You get lemons.
It's what
you
you
make
do
lemonade
with
out
it.
of
It's
yeah.
not. Yeah, it's what you have, but it's what you do with it. And so we weren't about to just destroy their lives, and a lot of doctors said, that your husband and wife you either split up or you get really, really close when you have something like this. But we stayed close, so we decided we were going to raise them and. And then, of course, Bill was a carpenter, so he built the ramps and he took care of their batteries, and he, made our house totally accessible for them so that they could get in. So we both kind of worked together and did the best we could. So.
Yeah, it sounds to me like, as you're speaking, that one of the key points that you, well, kind of the first thing is to say, God, help me. Kind of that phrase, let go and let God, instead of seeing God as maybe being like the enemy or somebody that maybe has orchestrated all this evil, which God isn't the source of this, but yet seeing God as my helper at this time. That would seem like that was a big step. And then I think a second thing that God showed you in all of this is that you treasure the time that you have with your sons. Make the most of each day. To say that, well, because of this disease, the day will come when we won't have you anymore, but we have you today. And we are going to make the most of this day. And so I think that's a good lesson for all of us, whether we've got a disease or not, to make the most of each day and not just say, well, I've got a million days ahead of me, so I'm just going to waste my days doing foolish things. But no, you made the most of it. And then a third thing that I notice is that your children, how a lot of times parents, when they're dying, they say to their children, we want you to go on and we want you to go on a good way. But when your children are now saying to the parents, saying, okay, this is as long as our life is on this earth, but we want you to go on in a good way. There's nothing more that we would want from you going forward is for you to go on in a good way. And it sounds like, well, you did that in a good way by being a teacher of children. And how your husband also, but you also mentioned about how easy it would have been to, because, the death of a child, will oftentimes bring a divorce, a breakup, or will bring things like alcohol problems and destructive behaviors and things like that. But I guess that's the thing, is that either something like this is going to crush you or it will make you stronger. And it sounds to me like you made the decision that, if we put our hands into God, he's going to somehow create blessings out of this, or lemonade out of lemons, so to speak. But you mentioned about how you just didn't realize how your children were being witnesses or making a difference in the lives of others, that people would come up and say, your two boys, and the way that you were living your life were such a blessing to us.
They would do little things like David, one time he bought a whole bunch of pencils and he wanted me to sharpen them. I said, what are you going to do with all these? I give them to kids at school. He said, when they lose a pencil, I have a pencil and I give it to them. So that was his way that he could give them something, and like at Easter program, they'd get up and speak, and David got up and spoke in his science class about the disease, about muscular dystrophy, and I just couldn't believe that he could do something like that. So they knew, but does any of us really know when our lives are going to end, But I think they knew about it, but they didn't think much, and they never showed any fear, they were never afraid. Or, but of course they went through it all, the accepting it and the anger, and finally, I'm going to be in this wheelchair, so I'm going to do all that I can do while I'm here, So.
Yeah. So as far as parents out there and people, you've been sharing a lot of advice, advice for all of us, just to, as far as life and the blessedness of life, and live life while you have it, and live it to God's glory, and to know that God is with us even in all circumstances, and bringing forth that good. But anything else that you would have to share to people who are going through difficult times? Anything that you've learned, or words of wisdom that you picked up along the way as you are now speaking and as you reflect upon this time?
Well, I would just say, don't give up, and when something bad happens, that it's hard to keep your eyes on Jesus. But when something terrible happens, you can't just wallow. But it takes a while to find somebody to support you, find a counselor and friends, or somebody to help you through it. Don't try to do it yourself, pastor. Talk to people to help you get through it. And that definitely happened to me, that if I wouldn't have had pastors and friends and counselors talking to us, that we finally said, okay, that this is what we're going to do then. We're going to raise them, and we don't, after a while, we didn't even think about that God dealt us a bad blow, and we just thought God gave us these boys for some reason, and we don't know why, but they're going to have a shortened life. But I would just say, find somebody to talk to your pastor, talk to a counselor, don't give up. And it takes a while. You have to wade through the hard, it took us probably a year to really wade through it before you really can look at Jesus and say, keep your eyes on Jesus, and then you can learn to live with it and make your life full and joyful.
Well, God bless you with two very special children, and it just sounds like they were such a blessing to so many people. And Bea, you certainly have been an inspiration and a blessing to so many of us, and we just thank you for your courage and your encouragement to us, and your strength, and just to show that God is with us always in all circumstances. Bringing forth His goodness in ways that sometimes we don't even always know. But Bea, thank you so much, and keep up the good work and with your message.
Glad to be here.
And I want to thank all of you for joining us this day as well.